Today, you get to meet Bri Conn, co-host of the Childfree Wealth podcast. I'm particularly excited for you to hear about their very clear niche, their workflow for the show now with over 120 episodes published, and their journey to get there. Bri and Jay and the Childfree Wealth brand is all about helping people who do not have kids and do not plan to have kids enjoy their time, money, and freedom in a way that supports their goals and dreams, which is a vastly different financial plan than what I, for example, and our family of four would need. What I want you to take away from this conversation is the power of niching down. Their brand and podcast is attracting clients like wild because they're so clear about who they serve. As you listen to my conversation with Bri today, ask yourself, how can I niche down further with my messaging? Bri, welcome to Reaching Abundance. I am so happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm very excited to be here and have this conversation with you.
Give us the high-level details of what you do and about your business.
Yeah, my name is Bri Conn and I work with Childfree Wealth. We are a life and financial planning firm for people who do not have kids and do not intend on having kids. And so our entire job is working with dinks and sinks, so single income no kids and dual income no kids. And we really focus on not only the financial part of, everything, because we are finance people, but also the life part too. And that's why we say we do life and financial planning. Our goal is really to make our clients' finances simple so that their life can be amazing, because we want you to go out and do things you enjoy and have the freedom and flexibility to do that without worrying about whether or not your finances can support that. The whole point for us is, let's figure out what your life looks like, and then what do we need to do to set your finances up to support you in that. So that's kind of our high-level overview of who we are and what we do.
So, okay, tell me those acronyms again. DINKS and what else? What did you say?
Yeah, sinks. So dual income, no kids, and then single income, no kids.
Okay,
So,
very
yep.
good. Okay. Yeah, it totally makes sense that their financial plan is probably drastically different than mine. And talk to me a little bit about, when did this become apparent that this is the rabbit hole we need to dive down into and this is our niche?
So it really came about. So Dr. J founded it, and then I joined back in April of 2023. And when he was going through the CFP, Certified Financial Planner courses, he said, I never saw anything about people who didn't have kids in there. It was always empty nesters, or you're planning for college, all of these different things for your kids. And he goes, that didn't fit me in my life. And then I was going through and deciding, I want to become a CFP. And I connected with him online. We actually met in a Facebook group for people who don't have kids and aren't planning on having kids. Yeah. And, it was really just, I didn't make the post, but I had commented on a couple posts one night, and one said, what do you do now? And the other one said, what do you want to do? And I commented on both of them. He saw my answers and said, hey, I'm a CFP. If you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'd love to pass your contact information on to people who I know that need marketing, because I was in marketing before. And I was talking to him. We met for the first time. We were supposed to talk for 30 minutes, ended up being 2 hours. Happened again, same scenario. We met, it was supposed to be a short while. It was another 2-hour conversation. And I just said, can I have a job? And there was not a job at that point. It was him. And so we met and we were talking, and as I was talking to him and as we were having a conversation, it was very clear that this was something I hadn't thought about before, but was so necessary. And since then, the past 2 years, we've just really been diving deeper and deeper and really going and focusing on people who don't have kids and aren't planning on having kids. And it's so, I think, ingrained into me to just automatically be like, yep, nope, no kids. That the other day I was reviewing something and they said, yeah, I have kids. And I was like, oh, wait, what? This is not who I planned for.
Who are
whoa.
you?
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, okay, well, I know how you got here. I can see that you kind of told me how you got here. But that was not something that I had anticipated. But it's just so incredibly different because one of the first questions we'll often ask our clients is, do you care about how much money you leave behind when you die? And so many of them say, no, I don't. I mean, I don't have anyone to leave it to necessarily. So no. And when you're in that situation and you've made those choices and you're like, yeah, but don't care at the end who it goes to, you don't need to build a big nest egg to pass on to anybody. So you can make different choices throughout your life.
As potentially like financial advisors, planners, other financial professionals are listening, I'm sure they're thinking, oh my gosh, this is like a dream come true to stumble upon a former marketing person who now wants to get into financial planning and join my firm. I mean, what a dream come true for Jay and this like perfect partnership that's forming because I'm seeing that, I'm sure your financial desire for the planning piece, but also your marketing background has a lot to do with, hey, let's lean into this. So, what did those conversations look like?
Yeah, it really was kind of a symbiotic relationship in the sense that he had the CFP that I needed to work with him, and then also I'm just about close to the finish line in my CFP. All the hard stuff is done. It's just finish the experience hours and then submit everything. So we're getting there. And he had that. I need that. I had a marketing background, and he was like, "Yep, I could use a marketing background, especially social media because it's not really my thing." And he's like, I just don't want to be on it. And it's kind of funny now because I'm also being the face of podcasts and being on there with him. I'm also like, I don't really want my face, or like, I don't want to be my face out there and also to be the one to check the comments. So I'm happy to create things. I'm happy to be out there. I'm not checking the comments. Somebody else can do that.
Yeah, expand the marketing and messaging team there.
Exactly. It has been very nice to do that. It started out with when we started the podcast initially, the two of us together, I was editing everything and getting it all up there and checking all of that. And now we have people who do that for us, and it's really, really helpful. But it was that, okay, hey, we can do the podcast. I can edit it. We can do all this and kind of get that going and just continue to grow.
So, did you have to talk Jay into doing a podcast? I'm imagining that he was like initially probably asking for the help with social media, but like maybe podcasting wasn't on his radar. Maybe like, yeah, I'm curious how that worked out.
Yeah, I actually did not have to talk him into it. He probably had to talk me into it more so, because he had done a couple episodes previously with someone else, and then he was like, "Yeah, I did these episodes, but I really want to have this podcast and do it every week." And so I'm like, "Okay, well, sure." I've often found myself in life in situations in which I have asked for something or asked for a job. I've not really done many interviews. I think I can count on one hand the number of interviews I've done in my life. It's mainly been me asking for jobs. And part of that, whenever I ask, it always seems like there's something on there that I didn't think about when I asked, podcast being one of them, that then I go, oh, yeah, I'll do that because I asked for this, but I didn't realize that's what I was asking for.
Right.
So,
Well, I mean, there's something to that, right? They always say that when you decide you're ready for something and you actually finally do it, that you already sat on it too long. And so I think this, like asking for the position before you fully know what's completely involved, but it was a safe ask, but it forced you to learn, grow, also allowing you to expand into a space that you wanted to. So I don't think that's a bad thing.
no, not at all. It's all been good. It's just kind of funny how it's this pattern repeating. It's like, oh, I ask for something and I don't fully know what's involved. And I'm like, okay, here we go.
As anyone is trying to further narrow their niche, because that's what, we hear constantly in the marketplace is like niche down, niche down. There's various formulas for like, people who this and this. So you have a couple qualifiers to like narrow your niche further. But there's always this fear in the background of excluding other people. And I know that you both felt the need, just even going through, like you said, Jay was in his classes and thinking, like, this isn't speaking to me. This is all for families. So he knew there was a need, but how scary was it to actually niche down, announce, this is who we're speaking to, that's it? Talk to me about that process.
It definitely took a while for me to feel comfortable even talking about it because I have people I talk to all the time. I'm a very talkative person in general. And so when I say I'm a financial planner, some people that I know were like, said, "Hey, can I come to you? Can I do this?" And I just said, I can't. I'm sorry. Like, this is not who I work with. But I think that the more you niche, the better, and the better you can serve your client because there are so many avenues in which you can go down for various different things. And if you know what your client is going through and there are so many clients, like I could just switch the names out, not necessarily their plans as of like what they want to do with their life match it perfectly, but one piece will match this client, another piece will match this client, and I can figure out things a lot easier versus if you're learning about one particular organization and you have a bunch of clients who are part of that organization, it's a lot easier to learn that because you already know the intricacies of it. Versus if you are trying to serve a bunch of different people where you have to learn the intricacies of different organizations continuously. And so we probably could niche down even further, honestly. We haven't done that because there is such a need. And I think it probably would serve us really well to niche down even further. So there are people who I know somebody who simply works with people who live in tiny homes, and that's a niche in of itself. The further you can break things down, you'll realize that there are a lot more people that need your help than you even have time to serve.
Yeah, it's kind of that almost like conundrum. If you're just like, yeah, I'm a planner. Okay, great. Like that's everyone. No one reaches out though, because, they could reach out to anyone who's a planner. So there's nothing specific that's like almost triggering them to reach out to you specifically because you are the solution. So, yeah, the niching conversation is something I'm having constantly with hopeful podcasters, existing podcasters, podcast rebrands, in all the ways. And I haven't yet met someone who doesn't need to niche even further. So, can you share some of your marketing mind with us? Just a little more about that. Like, if someone's struggling in this space and they're hearing, like, yeah, I should niche down, I should niche down, give them some guidance.
One, I think you have to truly have a passion for who you're working with. Otherwise, it's going to be real difficult to do that each day. If you can just find an area that you're interested in and enjoy learning about, that can be super, super helpful. So, you know, frankly, I'm not that interested in learning about 529s. Just, I'm not. I went into finance because I got married and I was learning that, hey, my wife is in a job that has really good benefits and all of these things. I need help figuring this out. And I couldn't find anybody I was comfortable working with. And so I went into finance to help really figure stuff out on my own because if I couldn't find somebody who could give me the answer, I was going to figure the answer out and whatever that meant. And I think a lot of people who get into finance that I've talked to anyway do have very something similar. They're trying to find an answer, they can't find it. And so they work on figuring that out for themselves and they're trying to just really get that going. And then they realize they enjoy doing that. That is something that you can use to help figure out your niche because when I started, I thought I was going to work strictly with airline pilots and I could. But at this point, if I were to do that, I would probably only work with airline pilots from a specific airline and probably only child-free airline pilots at this point in my life. Like, I don't intend to do that. It's one that I could see myself going down, but it's not a super top of the need. It's, hey, where can you really dig in, figure things out, and just become the expert in that area?
They have questions around, how would I find these customers? How would I market to them? And the marketing to them or reaching them almost becomes easier because they are in a specific place, work for a specific company in a specific area of the nation, or members of certain groups or whatever. And it almost becomes easier when you niche down. As you started to think, okay, we're going to launch this podcast, it's going to be called Childfree Wealth. Yes, we are going to turn off this certain group of people, but we are going to really lean into this group of people. What were some other thoughts around the brand, the colors, the style, the language? Talk to me a little bit about that process.
It was all very phased, and we didn't try to rush anything either. The style of it is just us talking. It's like, it is honestly, there is not a lot of thought other than this is who we are, this is how we act. That to me is a lot easier because otherwise I'd have to, put on a persona every time I got onto a podcast. That is not who I am. I mean, you've been out to dinner with me before. Like, it's just show up and be who you are. And so that really works for me because I would not, I mean, it works for both of us. We are not the people who would do well if we had to put on a particular persona and go about and do our work. I just know this is how we act in everyday life. Um, I'm a little bit goofier in person at times than I necessarily come across. Some of those things weren't big decisions. It was just really be yourself. And I know that's not necessarily the thing that people want to hear because everybody goes, well, who am I? Well, I don't know. You got to do some soul searching on your own for that one.
Well, but I think that answers a big question that's like almost like an undertone in the podcast space right now with everything moving to video and a lot of people adopting video into their process. There's a lot of pressure about, okay, suddenly do I have to wear makeup every day? Or does my space have to be perfect? Or do I have to go rent a studio? Or what do I have to do to like exude success enough that like people want to work with me? There's all of this underlying jabber that is nonsense. And through that, some people do think they have to look a certain way, they have to act a certain way, they have to say certain phrases. And you're simply saying, just be yourself because people are attracted to you for your values. Has there been any other surprises or things that are working that you didn't initially set out to do specifically, like within the show? Like maybe certain interviews or a certain fun question or anything like that that's come up that wasn't fully intentional?
Parasocial relationships are a very real thing. I didn't realize how much that would really happen though. And I guess, never had thought about that too much because I worked in social media and I was like, yep, parasocial relationships are a thing. You know what the person's putting out, you don't know anything behind that. But people will be like, oh my God, I'm so excited to meet you. Like, I've been listening to you forever. And sometimes that kind of goes, oh my. Like you get that like mental Rolodex of like, oh, what did I say? Like, you've listened to this episode. Okay, I don't remember what I said in that one because that was almost 2 years ago at this point, and like all these different things. So that is probably the hardest part is suddenly people are mentioning things and you're like, I forgot all about that.
Like
So
they know you at a level that you forgot was available out there.
yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I think some people are afraid of that. Tell me more about how you've navigated that. Like, I'm sure there are things that are specifically like off the table that you do not talk about on the podcast.
I have a spreadsheet.
Oh,
It's called Bri's Boundaries, and it
I
is
love
very
it.
clearly listed okay to talk about, not okay to talk about. So there are
Okay.
two sides of it, and it'll be like different topic areas and say, I mentioned that I have a wife. I never talk about my wife's name or mention any of that. Or, I say, yeah, I grew up in South Dakota. That's it. It's figuring out what areas you're like, yeah, I just don't need people to need them to look at that. I think it's easier to be a little bit more guarded at the beginning and always open up later than it is to go the other way. I talk about, I love to hike. I love to do all these things, but I don't necessarily ever share like location is a big thing that I won't share. But really, you have to figure out what you're comfortable with and have conversations too. If you're married and have a spouse, like, hey, I'm going to do this podcast. What am I okay talking about? And there'll be times I'll share things from my life. But if it involves my wife at all, I will go and I will talk to her and have a conversation with before her and say, like, yes, I can talk about this. Nope, don't talk about that. Different things. So very open, honest communication. I've never made shy the fact that I grew up in a family who really helped me and my parents put me through college. I had a conversation with my parents and I just said, hey, I'm talking about these things. And I really feel like I need to say this because if I'm not saying that and acknowledging the privilege that I do have, then I'm doing a disservice to so many. And my parents were absolutely, yeah, 100% agree. Like, you can't hide that and pretend that you had it harder than you did. I'm like, no, I would never want to. And I don't think that helps. So, having conversations with the people around you is super important. And if you don't want to talk about something, don't talk about it. Or if you record something and you're like, hey, actually, I don't want that in there. If you're recording it with somebody else, ask them if they can cut it out or just scrap the episode. I mean, we've recorded a couple episodes where afterwards I was like, you know what? Not sure I love that. Let's just hold on. And then eventually I'm like, let's just delete it. It's not that big of a deal. We can redo something else. So
Most people listening, I'm just going to venture to say that their brain probably works in spreadsheets because that's me too, and you. So if, posting on social media, starting a podcast, starting a YouTube channel, launching your own personal brand, like whatever is on your mind feels scary because there's this perception of exposure there. Spreadsheet it out like Bri did. Like, I think that's a great idea. Talk to your spouse, talk to your family, and figure out like what are okay topics, what are not, what do you want to keep private. There are, influencers everywhere that on both sides, right? They're the share it all people. You don't have to do that. And then there are the people that have done a great job of making you think that they're sharing it all, but there are definitely some things that they're holding private. So thank you for sharing about that and how to kind of navigate. And it doesn't have to be like risque topics are the only things that we don't talk about, right? It can be anything you want to keep private. So share with me a little more. Has Jay come to you with questions or challenges about like, how do we position this, or, what would be the best way to share about this particular topic in the child-free space? Like, have there been challenges there where you've needed to be careful about a topic that you're sharing that is still important to your audience? And how have you worked that out?
he always says, I don't have to ask how you're feeling. You'll just tell me. And that's so true. To so many of these things, people are like, how do you do that? I'm like, I don't know. We just talk. Like we just talk. That's the level that we're on. And it works for us. Most of the time when we'll share our stories, we anonymize them anyway, because we're not saying like, oh, so-and-so did this. We'll just be like, hey, we've had people who've gone through the situation and it's not been an issue. I can only think of one time where it was more of like a personal thing. He was like, hey, would it be okay if I talked about this? And I was like, you know what? Let me think about that. And I came back a couple days later and said, no, I would rather not. Like, thank you for asking, but no. And that's what we do. If we have something we want to talk about and we think it could be helpful, but it involves the other person, we just have a conversation with one another. And so it truly, I think so much of our stuff is just communicate. And I think a lot of the world is missing that.
Yeah, I agree. And it does seem like you connect, you kind of can maybe read each other's mind a little bit or just understand various language cues and things like that. I think that's what a lot of people are craving in a co host. And it's not really something that you can say, oh, well, like, look for these qualities. But, communication would be a big deal. And I will say, I've even been put in the like middleman position before where, there's these two financial professionals. They've been doing a podcast together as like a joint venture type of thing. And one thinks this way and one thinks that way. And so we need to come together and outline topics that we both agree on, with me being the facilitator. And so, yes, I can do that, but it was challenging because I was looking at these two thinking, how did y'all even come together? Because this doesn't seem to be working. But with that being said, I want to highlight the piece of allowing your content to ebb and flow and not necessarily sticking to a strict, style, sequence, frequency, even, which, that could be like a crazy statement in the podcast space. You have to allow for your personal growth. So have there been any pieces like that where you're like, oh, okay, we're kind of, it's not a pivot because you're still in this child-free space, but anything that has happened there that you've had to navigate?
Yeah, it hasn't been too big of a thing, but we were doing book clubs for about a year, and every month we would read a different book. And we ended that back in May of 2024. Thought we were gonna take a summer break, and it's now January of 2025, and we still have not returned to that. It was like, "Hey, this was really good, it worked for us at the time," and now it's just not working anymore. We don't have the time for it to even read those books every month like we want to and then talk about it. I'm at the point where if I'm reading a book, I really just wanna, read a book and enjoy it. I don't wanna have to read it to feel like I need to get it done and then summarize it, all of these different things. Many times it'll be, "Oh, hey, I have this idea, I wanna talk about it." And then we shoot a message over to the person who coordinates all our schedule, and we just say, "Hey, we have this idea, we'd love to talk about it. We're gonna record it on this date. Just put it in wherever you think of it." It's like, it's not a big issue. Um, we have our plan, but it's not it really it all comes down to communicate. And I think I have a degree in communications, and I've learned that so many people are not good communicators, and it drives me absolutely bonkers because communication, like good quality communication really fixes so many issues, and yet so many people struggle with it.
Yeah, for sure. And even your podcast team, which I want to ask you about. You've alluded a couple times to someone who does your scheduling. Now someone else does the editing and posting, I think. Talk to me about the process of, how you guys schedule, how you guys manage this workflow with people in your team, and just give listeners an idea of, a little window into your podcasting flow of how does this work for you guys?
Yeah, we have a asynchronous team, so we all basically work. We have some overlap in our hours and we have standard calendar blocks. Otherwise, it's not, and the calendar blocks I should know are really only for client meetings. So it's, hey, these meetings are going to happen at these different times. And then these other times are reserved for either one-on-one. We have, lunch scheduled in for every day, like leave everybody alone, let them eat
Yeah.
during the day.
Important.
Yeah, all hands, all of those different things. Other than that, it's really just to get your work done and be an adult. Like, we joke about it all the time, but if our compliance and if HR laws would allow it, our manual would just simply be an adult, period. That's it. Whenever there's something that we need to record, we try and keep everything recorded about a quarter out in advance. And so usually the person who does our scheduling will say, "Hey, this has been on the idea list for a while. It's scheduled to go out on this date. Can you guys get this recorded?" And they'll email either me or Jay, usually me, and then I just pick a time on the calendar. And if it's on the calendar, we have everything color coded. We use Google Calendar for all of it. And so red is our podcast or press stuff. And it's just, okay, cool. We show up and often Jay goes, "What are we talking about today?" And I said, "Well, this is the topic we were given, so let's go." At this point in time, all I do anymore is say, "Okay, I will record that." We record it, and then I say, "Hey, we recorded it. Good to go."
That's the dream, I think, for everyone. Ideally, that's what you want. You want to be able to serve your clients, whether you're in the client service space or if you're doing like client acquisition and sales or whatever you're doing in the business, you need time for your business, not just, you know, planning, recording, marketing, posting this. I mean, it could become a full-time job very quickly. Can you tell me a little more about what was your decision and communication like as far as hiring a team internally to help with the podcast or to outsource? What did that look like for you? Was there a decision matrix spreadsheet involved?
There was not. It was really just, hey, we know somebody who knows this editor who they really like. Okay, cool. Let's give it a try. It's been working out well for us. And then it's, hey, we know somebody who does operations really well. Okay, let's have them work on our scheduling. Awesome. So it's really not for us like any sort of scientific thing. It's just we know somebody. Are they doing good work? Sure. If they're not, then that's a different conversation. But so far with our podcast, we've been really lucky to have some good quality people who can manage all that for us.
Referrals are where it's at.
Yep, exactly. Exactly.
I know you have this Childfree Wealth checkup that's available. It looks like people could just click a button and sign up on the website. Tell me, what does that involve and who should be looking into that?
Yeah, we work with anybody who doesn't have kids, not planning on having kids. So if you're there and you're saying, hey, I just need somebody to review my finances, even if you're a financial professional, we've had that and where financial professionals have been like, hey, I don't have kids and I'm not planning on having kids. What am I missing? And so you can go to our website, you can schedule it. It's $250. What happens is you pick a time, you pay, and then you'll get an email from one of us. Here's a financial information form. Please fill it out. Here's a link to our Right Capital, which is our financial planning software, which I'm sure many of the people listening are familiar with. And then we'll go through and we'll kind of give a child-free lens on all of it. And so, when you take your vehicle in to go get serviced, they give you a report that's red, yellow, green. We do the same thing with finances and life. We ask a bunch of questions and then we'll rank it red, yellow, green and say like, hey, these are some things to think about. These are questions we often ran into, or hey, things look really good. So it can be a variety of those different avenues, but it can be for anybody, whether you're a financial professional, whether you're interested in just learning more and you just really want to get an overview and diagnostic on your finances in your life.
And now let me ask you kind of like an insider question, since that is, I'm assuming, kind of like a lead magnet. It is a low dollar, like cheaper option for somebody to just get into your business ecosystem and give you a chance to have a conversation with someone. Is that the primary call to action on your podcast all the time? Or how did you structure what you'll say on the show versus what's offered on your website? Because I think that's where people get stuck too.
We are just very much, you'll see, we always say, make your finances simple so your life can be amazing. So it is a message that is very well repeated throughout everything because repetition, of course, like I don't remember what the number is. We have to say so many things so many times for people to actually remember it and understand it. Repetition is so, so important. I've met with people who've said, hey, I've been listening to the podcast forever and I hear all these things. Even I did one recently and I asked them a question and they gave me a certain answer. And then I started saying something and they go, yeah, I can hear your voice in my head already from the podcast. It's like, great.
They
That's
know.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes. It's really not much of a difference between the two, just because you kind of have to repeat that same message over and over again.
Yeah, that's something that I'm often guiding people through is rather than, on your show saying like, sign up for financial planning, we got to get people just to baby step in just a little bit, like a maybe free or like a lower cost option that just allows them to step foot in the door, feel the temperature, see if they like it, and decide if they're going to stay. Otherwise, it feels like a larger ask when you're like, oh, buy my multiple $1,000 thing or sign up for life, right? It's a little bit different. So I love kind of being able to look at the show, the website, this offer, and be able to see that trail. And I just want to encourage anybody that's listening, consider that when you're designing your show. What is the baby step offer that we can, talk about, that we can invite people in? So I love that you did that. I think you've done it so well. Where should people follow you and find you?
You can find us childfreewealth.com or childfreewealth on all social medias minus Twitter. We're not there. And you can find podcasts, Child Free Wealth. If you just search Child Free Wealth, you're going to find one of us. I think we are probably the top search results for anything when it comes to child-free financial planning, mainly because it's not Googled that often. But that's another question.
Well, it's Googled often for the people who need that.
Yes.
And that's the key.
Exactly. Those search terms, we're usually on the top there, but it's child-free wealth everywhere.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Bri. I love getting a window into kind of like the back end of your business and your podcast. And I just appreciate all the advice that you have for us. Thank you.